Hi, good afternoon. On behalf of Temple Sholom Pompano Beach and the congregation, the officers, and the clergy, we want to welcome you to our virtual Holocaust Memorial Service. And I want to assure everyone before we begin that even though we are currently in our temple sanctuary, our beloved sanctuary, which can hold possibly 500 people with the overflow, and our participants consist of 5 people. We are all maintaining a respectful distance for the sake of health, and I hope that everyone at home is doing the same thing. At this time, I'm going to do the opening prayer, and those of you who were fortunate to get the service in your email, you can follow along at home. I'm going to be doing both the leader and the congregational parts. God of all people everywhere, you reveal yourself in myriad ways, speaking through different voices to enlighten our world and enrich our lives. All are created in your image, but in the face of prejudice and persecution, too often we fail to stand together. So we gather today in memory. We remember the lives of those who were murdered in the Holocaust and subsequent genocides. We give thanks for those who have courageously shared their stories. We recommit ourselves to transform the world through your love. We pray silently. And at this time, I will call upon Ms. Sherry Field Almaraz to light the 6 candles. We light these candles without a blessing. They are not happy candles in memory of the 6 million. Thank you, Sherry. Now we'll hear from our cantor, Javier Smolens.
Shalom.
Thank you, Cantor. The next prayer. God of the past, present, and future, we remember today, 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, the millions of other victims of Nazi persecution, and all those who have been targeted and killed in subsequent genocides. We remember those who, having survived genocide, share their stories with us. We appreciate those who have told us their stories of struggle, survival, and triumph. We remember those Jews and righteous Gentiles who stood up against injustice and saved lives. We give thanks to you for their example. Together we acknowledge that every life is loved by you and sacred. Yet, during the Holocaust, too many failed to stand together with their neighbors. Oppression stains your world and contradicts your love. So we pray that you will inspire us now as we stand together on this day, together in the love of God. Let us commit to remembering and to glorify God in our words and actions. This time we'll hear from Mr. Peter Broadfield playing as Brent on the recorder. Peter, that was lovely. At this time, we will hear our keynote speaker, Ms. Sherryfield Alvarez.
Just tell me.
Hi everybody, thank you for being here, being part of this, watching us. I hope everyone is safe and healthy wherever you are watching us. Before I get into my speech, which isn't really a speech, I have no speech, I just made some notes. I just want to say why it is I up here speaking. Gail and Stanley Eisen have always been, from what I understand, even from before my arrival here, in charge of Holocaust events and remembrances and Yom HaShoah celebrations. And they asked me to speak several months ago. And of course, before Gail even finished her sentence, I had already said no, because I am usually a big crybaby when it comes to this stuff. It's a very emotional subject for me. And she said to me, well, if you cry, everybody will know it's a subject that's dear to your heart. And I realized, you know what, it's going to be a subject that's dear to my heart no matter what, so I might as well make the effort. We all wound up not being able to be together here. They're stuck in California, and so here I am. You know, the reason that I wound up even knowing about this and being so involved with it is based on a trip to Israel when I was in 2011, I went to Israel with my husband, and it was a vacation. We wanted to go see my family, and he wanted to go to Yad Vashem, to the Holocaust Museum. And I said no. I said, this is vacation. We're supposed to be having a good time. I don't want to do anything that's sad or depressing. And he said, okay, I'll go myself, and I'll meet you later. And I'm a perfect person to use reverse psychology on, because the second he said that, I said, okay, I'll go. And I did, and honestly, that was a life-changing experience for me. It was horrifying. It was like a 6 tissue box day for me. And after that, I came back and I felt like I wanted to know more. Up until that time, I knew nothing. I didn't know the difference between Passover and Purim. I just didn't. My family, I guess, tried to instill some of that in me when I was young, but I was completely disinterested and I was rebellious, and I didn't want to know. I came back to New York after that trip, and I called Brotherhood Synagogue in New York, and I said, I want to learn Torah. I don't know anything. Is there anybody there who can teach me? And they put me through to Phil Rothman, who is a Torah scholar, a historian. He's a rabbi. He's the director of the synagogue there. And we started studying on Wednesdays. And honestly, from 2012, February until today, we've almost never missed a Wednesday. Every Wednesday we did it in his office in New York. Is that better? Yeah. We did it in his office in New York, and now we do it, now that I'm living in Florida, we do it here every Wednesday, 12 to 1. So don't hold me with that time, I don't want fun with that. This is going to be the first time since 1959 when Jews around the world are not gathering together. It became a law in Israel in 1959 to commemorate this day. I don't think it matters, because I think those of us, I think we can virtually remember all the people who cry out to be remembered, and we have that in our hearts whether we're gathered or not. Yom HaShoah actually celebrates the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place in 1943. And that happened after 250,000 Jews were deported to Treblinka to be murdered. The ones who were left behind attempted to fight back. People always ask, why didn't we fight back? And I've actually asked that question myself. You know, in the book, Moral Grandeur and Spiritual Audacity, which someone gifted me, really crediting me with far greater intellectual capacity than I have. It's a very difficult book to get through, but in there, Abraham Joshua Heschel says, if you don't fight for good in times that are good, be prepared to fight against evil in times that are evil. And that's kind of what happened. The people in the Warsaw Ghetto, they tried to fight back. They obtained weapons. Some they got from the Germans. Some were handmade. They brought explosives into the ghetto. And they tried, even though there were different factions, there were right-wing factions and left-wing factions, everyone united to try to A, save the people that had already been taken to Treblinka and rescue them before they were murdered, and B, save the people that were left in their little ghetto in Warsaw. It was an unrealistic purpose. It was an unrealistic hope, because they really never had a chance. The uprising took place on April 19th, and that's why we celebrate this week, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Unfortunately, when they refused to surrender, the whole ghetto was burned down. In his book, this I need to read, because this is what it actually says. There's a chapter in that book that says, to save a soul. The human is graced with the ability to search the soul and reflect, for what purpose am I alive? Is there a need for my existence? Would my absence create a vacuum in the world? and if we say yes, there will be a void, an impairment to the world, is it then incumbent upon me to fulfill a purpose in this life? Do I exist that I might build and restore? And that theme of building and restoring, tikkun olam, that's a theme that goes through all of Judaism, trying to restore. Who can measure, that's what I've been thinking about Yom HaShoah, who can measure the void that occurred when 6 million people were annihilated? It was over 1/3 of the entire Jewish population that was wiped out. If you think of it now, there's about 180,000 people worldwide who have died from COVID-19. And we are separating ourselves, we're quarantined, we're all wringing our hands how to stop this and how to resume our lives. This was over 30 times that number, millions, and in a comparatively small space, just nothing but bodies everywhere. What would those people have accomplished if they weren't annihilated, if they didn't disappear, if they lived, and what would their children have been able to accomplish? My father was one of 6 siblings. 3 made it out alive. He, his brother, and their sister, my Aunt Frida. My father and my Uncle Steve came to the United States, to New York, and Aunt Frida chose to go to Israel. Their parents, my grandparents, were also on that train and never seen again. Aunt Frida was a teenager at that time. She was on a train heading for Treblinka, and she said that there were slats in the window, long, thin slats on the side of the train car. And she and a group of kids that were on that car pushed those slats out and jumped, squeezed through, and jumped out of the train while it was moving. And they slid down a hill and wound up in this forest. And they stayed there for 2 years. And when we were visiting her in Israel on this last trip in 2018, she loved to talk about this. You know, my father never did. I don't know if it was because he didn't want to speak about it or if it was because he knew at the time when I was a kid I was not interested. But Frida wanted to talk about it. She has over 3 hours of tapes that they hold at Yad Vashem if anyone ever wants to hear them. Anyway, she just kept telling us stories, and my husband and I were sitting in her dining room that day, and all I remember is tears falling on the floor the whole time she was speaking. And she said that my father was taken to a prison in Siberia, and he got typhoid fever, which I guess was fairly common at that time. And they took him to a hospital, and a nurse in that hospital, I guess kind of took a shine to him. And when the commander came back to take him to the prison, she didn't let them. She said that he was still ill and very contagious, even though he wasn't. And she kept him there in that hospital until the end of the war. And Aunt Frida stayed in that forest. We said, how did you live in the forest? She said, we ate grass in the summer and we ate snow in the winter. So it was a horrifying time, obviously, for them. But when she came to Israel, and this is the joyful part of my speech, she came to, that's what I feel is the legacy of the people who survived. They have a daughter named Orit. She is a teacher. She was an Arabic translator for the Israeli army. Her husband is a software engineer. Her the other siblings are 3 triplets. Noga is an attorney. Her husband is a professor at Bar Ilan. He will get his PhD this year. Shahar is the middle triplet. He's an electronics engineer. He builds planes for the Israeli army. His fiancée is a speech therapist. And Karen is the third triplet. She's an economist. She works as a professor of economy at Bar-Ilan University as well. And her husband, Dean, is a major general in the Israeli army. I'm having Doreen show the picture because I want to put a face to this, that this is what comes from someone jumping off a moving train and thinking about what could have been for all the people that didn't do that or weren't able to do that. I want to just bring up that we had a talk here at some point about the righteous Gentiles. And someone just sent me an email yesterday about someone named Sir Nicholas Winton. I don't know if anyone else ever heard of him, but if you want to Google him, it was an amazing story. Apparently, he took 669 children out of Germany and brought them to Britain and found new families for them. And he never told anyone. He kept it kind of just a secret to himself, but he kept a log of every child that he sent and what family they wound up going to. 50 years later, his wife found that in an attic somewhere and brought it to a journalist. And they invited him to this event, and he didn't know why he was going there. His wife said they were going to some event, and while they were there, it was a TV show. And while they were there, all the people in the audience stood up, and he was turning around. He had no idea why. And it turns out that all the people in that audience were children that he had rescued. It was so, oh my gosh, forget it. It was another two tissue box day for me. So I just want to leave by saying that everyone, we all have in our hearts the ones who are gone and the ones who didn't get out, and the 6 million that we know about, but I also have a place in my heart for the ones that would have been here and what they would have been able to bring to our worlds. Because if they're anything like my cousins, who I'm obviously very proud of, it could have been so much more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that tender and heartfelt story. It kind of puts a face on the stories that we read. What I'm going to offer now is once again our musician, Mr. Peter Braunfield. I think this is the theme from Schindler's List. Peter. A simple but very heartfelt tune, and that's a good lead-in for the poem I'm going to share with you now. It was written by Avram Sutzkeller, who has been called, his dates are 1913 to 2010. And he was a Holocaust survivor, he was a partisan. After he escaped from the camps, he was able to flee into the woods and fight back against the killers. He was a Yiddishist and a poet. The New York Times called him the greatest poet of the Holocaust of his generation. And this is dedicated to the billion children who perished in the Holocaust. It's called Toys. Your toys, my child, hold them dear. Your toys smaller even than you. And at night, when the fire drifts off to sleep, wrap them up in the stars from on top of a tree. Let the golden pony graze the foggy sweetness of the grass, and dress your little boy doll in his galoshes when the eagle of the sea hurls a gust. And put a Panama hat on your doll, and give her a little bell to hold, for not one of them has a mother, and they cry out to God by the wall. Love them, your little princess dolls. I remember such a day, woe is me and alack. 7 streets, and all filled with dolls, and the city had not one child. Now we'll hear from the cantor. Again, Peter, thank you very much. Now we have Sherry Field-Almaraz once again, who will read for us the words of Rabbi Ephraim Mervis. He is the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the British Commonwealth. And it's called A Tribute to Those Who Saved Others.
A tribute to those who saved others. There is a great deal to be learned from the way that the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, responded to the first human tragedy. When Cain murdered Abel, his parents might have been forgiven for thinking that the experiment of human civilization had failed and that all hope was lost. What did Adam and Eve say when they learned of this catastrophe? Nothing. There is no record in the Bible of them having responded in any way at all, other than continuing with their lives, having another child, and rebuilding their family. We live in challenging times. Hate speech and hate crime are on the rise. Respect for differences appears to be declining. Our society is becoming increasingly polarized. So what should our reaction be? To match the hateful rhetoric with invective of our own, I believe that we should look to the heroes of the Holocaust, both the survivors and the righteous Gentiles. We should not be intimidated or cowed into silence. Despite all the challenges that contemporary society faces, we must remain optimistic. Let us work with our Gentile neighbors, Christians, Muslims, other denominations, and those of no faith, to cultivate dialogue and promote respectful engagement. The theme of our Holocaust Memorial Day is Stand Together. We pledge to take the time to learn about what can happen when hatred is left to develop unchecked, and help to ensure that it can never happen again. The Holocaust is now 75 years, a lifetime away, and the time when there will be no more survivors left to share their experiences draws even closer. Let us resolve to stand together so that their legacy will be a society of optimism, cooperation, and compassion.
At this time, we'll do the Yom HaShoah. The cantor will sing it for us. That's the God full of mercy, generally sung at funerals. We'll ask everyone to please rise.
מתפללים בעד על יד נשמותיהם
Thank you, Cantor. Rather than reading the translation, and that was the mole specifically for the Holocaust, I'm going to offer a poem by Yehuda Amichai. Yehuda Amichai was lucky enough to be able to flee Europe when he was about 12 years old. His parents brought him to Israel. He grew up there. He served, he defended the state in both the War of Independence and in the 1956 Sinai campaign. And we lost him, sadly. He was born in 1924. He passed in 2000. But during the time that he was alive, he was easily the most popular poet in Israel. His poems would be read at funerals, at weddings, at state occasions, which was significant and somewhat unusual because the man, even though Yehuda Amichai had been raised Orthodox, when he became an adult, he became an agnostic. But I'm offering this prayer. It's called God Full of Mercy. God full of mercy, the prayer for the dead. If God was not full of mercy, mercy would have been in the world, not just in him. I who plucked flowers in the hills and looked down into all the valleys, I who brought corpses of those killed in battle down from the hills, can tell you that the world is empty of mercy. I who was king of salt at the seashore, who stood without a decision at my window, who counted the steps of angels, whose heart lifted weights of anguish in the horrible contests of war. I who use only a small part of the words in the dictionary. I who must decipher riddles I don't even want to decipher. Know that if not for the God full of mercy, there would be mercy in the world, not just in him. The Song of the Partisans.
Never say you are going on your final road. Although little skies block out blue days, our longed for hour will yet come. Our step will be out, we are here. This song is written with our blood, not with lead. It is not a song of a free bird flying overhead. Amid crumbling walls, a people sang this song with grenades in their hands. So never say the road now ends for you. All those skies of lead block out days of blue. Our longed for hour will yet come. Our step will be out. We are here. We are here. So nicht geht mal als du gehst den besten Weg, von ihm im Laien verstehen neue Tag. Komm wenn du kommst, gewinst die Schub, zweiter Point und unser Brot mit seinen Tod. Komm wenn du kommst, gewinst die Schub, zweiter Point und unser Brot mit seinen Tod. Von grünen Palmenland mit weißen Land von Schnee, mit Blumen mit Ursen Wein, mit Ursen Wein. Und wo gefallen sich ein Spitz von unser Blut, sprach der Mann für unser Bude, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen sich
All right, first the closing prayer for the unknown heroes. And then Cantor will lead us to the mourner's couch. Almighty God, full of wisdom, remember all the forgotten and unrecognized heroes of Israel, who knowingly and willingly sacrificed their lives for the sake of others. In our hearts they will live forever and ever. Amen. Ruler of the universe, open our hearts to the plight of the displaced and discarded members of our society. By helping them, we will honor the memory of the unknown heroes of the Holocaust. We'll say amen.
Let's recite together the mourner's couch. Id gadal ve'id kadash shemerabah. Be'alma dibra chilute ve'yamlich malchute. Bechayei kol u'yomei kol u'bechayei dechol beit Yisrael. Barara u'lisman karim ve'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabah mevorach leolam ilolmei olmaya. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילם עם כל ברכתה ושירתה תוש וחתה ונחמתה למירם נעלמה ואמרו אמן יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה בחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen.
All right, and before Cantor leads us in the Hatikvah, we'll call upon Sherry to lead the closing prayer.
Okay, Lord, God of heaven and earth, we have come together to pledge that our dead will never be forgotten, and we will do this by incorporating the lessons of our faith into our daily lives. Let us remember that every life is precious, that all humanity, Gentile and Jew, must work together, even in these horrific days of the viral Holocaust, even as the illness drives us into our homes. Let us remember those whose homes are not as fine as ours. When we avoid crowds but risk entering a supermarket or store, let us recall those who cannot afford proper food. When we wash our hands for the millionth time, let us think of those healthcare workers who do the same over and over, even as they are risking their lives. And finally, God, grant us patience and fortitude as we proceed through the darkness and into the light. Amen.
Amen.